trick to it is, I was told by a gentleman years ago, your trick, knowing that you've got the tree pruned properly, is to be able to pick up a cat and throw it to a tree and it can't come from you. That always gets a laugh, but it's really true. If you go back and start looking at all the research, that's pretty much what happens. They prune that tree to where it's an ugly skeleton for the tree. And that's really what you should be pruning. But we're behind the 8 ball, and we're doing what we are here today, partly to get you some knowledge about how you should be doing it. And you can go in here and do this, and hopefully we won't do enough damage to the trees that they'll die by just taking out the suckers, the water sprouts, and the branches that are growing to the center. Any of those that grow to the center, you want to take those out. And then any of them that are doing crossing, if they've got crossing limbs, you want to decide on those which one you want to leave. And the best thing is to put the ones up that are going to the center, because the purpose of that is to get air movement into the center of that tree. That way it cuts down on disease problems. And it also cuts down on the number of fruit, which will then increase the size of the fruit that are going to be harvested. So if you just do those, taking out the water sprouts that are growing straight up, taking out anything growing toward the center, you can see that's really what we've done here, and Chris is still doing, and we've opened that up a lot. I mean, you can already see. So we've got a branch back here, this ladder up. I think we're going to bring the group around. We'll kind of show you a few pieces on it. And what we'd like to do is put a pair of fingers in your hands, let you go around and kind of get the feel for it, because that's what a lot of people are. I think Brad said this too. A lot of people are afraid of hurting the trees or any shrubbery when they're pruning it. And the thing of it is, you know, God has created these plants to be very forgiving to prune. But you can do a bad pruning job and the tree will still recover. And what a lot of us think is a bad pruning job really isn't, especially when it comes to the fruit trees. Because really what you're going to do is you're just going to increase the size of the fruit, and that's really what you want to be doing. And you're also going to cut down on the disease problem that you're going to end up having, and that way you don't have to, it's one of those things you don't have to spray for. You can get air movement going to the tree. So if you want to walk around this side, we'll show you real quickly. When you're taking these old trees and trying to rejuvenate them, you're going to have to take care of loggers, almost guaranteed. And I don't mean to promote one company or another, and I won't say the brand, but this one has this dual link inside of it, and I'm telling you, it just, Chris will even tell you it too, it's so slick. It's like
smooth.
Very, very smooth cutting.
And not to interrupt, Scott, but I will tell you guys, I'm a particular person when it comes to tools. Kindly pay for what you get. I will honestly say that when it comes to tools, but make sure that when you're going out and buying this stuff that you go, because I know some of our older folks got arthritis in your hands. You want to make sure you got something that's very comfortable, because you're going to do these repetitive cuts. So for my older folks, I usually like to recommend a ratcheting type, because it actually locks just kind of like a ratchet. That way you don't have to put as much hand pressure. So, you know, just make sure that when you're shopping for these tools, don't get the cheapest thing. Get something that feels well balanced and it's good. Felco is what I like. That's the brand that I usually go to.
And I agree. That's fine. I agree with that. That's usually where I go to. But as you just said, the ease, I mean, you can prune with, take out big suckers with these all day long, and it's amazing. And this set, they're a year old, and they've kept an edge for the past year, and I have been pruning the daylights with it. I mean, everything you can imagine. So the other thing is, when you're out here, so we're talking about the tools, and you're going to get, and I've got a few pairs of hand pruners here. This is a set that I will tell you not to get or not to use because, and they started rusting up because I haven't used them. But this is, it is a bypass, but it's almost a crushing bypass, and you really don't want that whenever you're doing fruit trees or any kind of pruning, unless you're doing propagating pruning. And you need to crush the stem before you do it. These are bypass as well. These are nice and sharp. You want to be careful with it because if you pull it across your hand, it'll cut you like a razor blade. And these are actually whiskers. You can get these at Lowe's, places like that, and they're relatively inexpensive. And people think $40 for a pair of pruners, but these will last you. I've had this pair for 15 years.
How often do you have to sharpen? Because I always feel like I should sharpen, but I don't know how to sharpen.
Well,
do you ever sharpen them?
I do, but the great thing on these is that these have replaceable blades. And so I take and pull the blades off and replace the blade, and then in the wintertime when I have nothing else better to do, and I remember, I will go in and pull out those blades and then sharpen them.
And Velco makes all replacement parts for their stuff, all the gears and the blades too.
Yep.
So you can buy kits for these for like $10 when you buy it. So the spot's right there. Me, I usually just change blades. But you can buy a little tool they make that actually, where you buy these, but
this little piece right here.
It works okay.
Yeah, you can take this and you can put that blade and you can use this with it on, but it's difficult. It's easier if you take this blade off, put a new one on, go ahead and do pruning, then when you've got time, sit down and run this through here and it'll sharpen it up. It only takes about 30, 40 dollars to it, and it'll put it in because this is really, really good surgical steel here, or cutting blade here. One of the other things we do too is, and this is nice having this in the spray bottle, is that once you prune one tree and you move on to the next tree, you want to spray those blades, and that helps cut down on spray diseases as well. And even though this is all the same orchard, you never know when there might be a disease in one of the trees, and you're better off to be. This is alcohol.
It doesn't rust your tools, it evaporates quickly.
Yes.
We used bleach for years and recommended it, but if you ever put metal in bleach, it eats it up really bad. So rubbing alcohol, or TSP, trisodium phosphate, that you buy in the hardware store in the painting aisle, that also is a disinfectant for your tools.
So you figured out you've got your pruners. Sometimes you might need, there's a few limbs in here we'll show you that you probably will need a chainsaw that you want to do. And we may not do that here today, because if we would do that now, it could end up killing the tree, because you're taking too big of a wound out when you grow in the season. So you really want to come back in and do that, probably do that when these trees go dormant. Not probably, you should wait to do it when they go dormant. But the loppers, I'm just going to pass them around, let you all end up seeing how easy they operate. If you all want to scoot around over here closer, Chris is going to show you.
Now guys, if you would have planted this tree and pruned it every year, you wouldn't be up in the ladder as much, so I will say that. But if you guys look behind us, we've made a bunch of cuts inside the center of this tree. Want the sunlight to come down. Any sucker or branch that grows straight up like this will not set fruit. There's a hormone inside this tree that when these branches bend over, they'll actually set flower buds and then grow fruit. As long as they're sticking up, that hormone will activate in the tree. So if you guys have ever driven by like somebody's house and you've seen weights in the tree, weighing branches down, or strings tying these down, that's what the person's trying to do, is get that pheromone to set flowers. But in this case, anything in the center of a tree this size just needs to go, because we want the sunlight to come down in. All your fruit should be out here on the edges and sort of on the inside right here as the sun comes. So this is what we call a central leader pruning. When the tree's young, if we would have had it as a whip, we actually would have went in and popped that tree trunk in the center, and it calls it the lateral branch, and they call that the scaffolding for the tree. So all of this stuff you guys see here, you're like, oh, it's prune one, there's going to be apples. So look on the outside of the tree, there's plenty of other things. This tree's going to have hundreds of apples, and if we want the nice big apples, we want to get rid of a lot of these limbs. So pretty much everything you see that's hanging towards the inside of the tree here.
That's perfect. You saw how he struggled? You shouldn't do that. It shouldn't. If you have to struggle like that with it, you need a bigger.
Yeah, I'm usually stuff, but you guys can see there's some dead stuff right here too that's crossing. This right here, it's may set fruit, but we would go ahead and cut this one out so we can sacrifice it, get bigger fruit out here on the end. As you guys can see, I'm starting to open it up. All of this stuff here, all of this is rehabbing these little trees. Sometimes that's just what you got to do, is you got to make a lot of cuts. The stock's right. I know you're going to be cringing with yourself thinking, oh my goodness, what am I doing? But as you guys can see, I'm opening up this tree here, and we're going to let all this other fruit grow, and we're going to get big apples in here. We don't, what is it, Scott? 3 apples per spur recommendation?
Yeah.
So, you know, you see these apples being growed up with small apples, and you're like, well, my goodness, where's these apples at? Well, that's what's going on right there. I think I'll leave that one. Did you guys see this one going straight up? It all set bloom, but it won't grow fruit. I promise you that.
And you can see the one that goes out here to the point where it's a tight V. That not on that limb there. That one he just touched.
This one here?
No, up the top one there. No, back down middle there. That one there goes all the way out to the end.
We cut that one?
No, I would go up there and cut the.
That's what I was going to do.
Yes.
Cut this
right
here.
there.
Yeah. And that way we'll get good fruit production out there on the end, guys. Once again, come back in here and cut some of these bigger branches that are a little bit closer to the center of the tree. That'll free you up a lot of energy from the tree. And as you guys can see, we're going to get a lot of air through here now too. And that's what we want to do, is to dry these trees out a little bit.
Now, when you're doing this, come next spring, you're going to end up seeing a big flush of more suckers all along these branches that are going to come up like crazy, like water sprouts, like thousands. You just need to go back in, and when you start pruning, it's an annual thing you have to do. But the great thing is, all those little sprouts are going to be just it's just like little scissors.
You can use the Velcros, these bypass, and they work fantastic. So you guys can see we've really opened that tree up now. Who lives here in the county? Everybody? So drive by this summer a few times and keep an eye on this tree, and you'll see versus the other ones how big these apples will get. I had a guy come to my house a few years ago, and he said, Chris, how do you get apples the size of softballs? I said, well, I prune my tree and I thin my fruit. So if this tree was in perfect pruning, you guys had done a good job, you still would want to come out and pick fruit off and thin your fruit so you get bigger fruit too.
Yeah, and here's a prime example of some of those lateral shoots that have went straight up, or not lateral, but the vertical shoots that went straight up as suckers. This one here and this one here are things that we shouldn't have left. And so those are going to be branches that this fall we'll come back in and take those out. And so you can start to see it's really going to look like a little tiny squatty tree that's not going to be much to look at, but it will have good fruit on it.
Yeah, and the other piece with pruning too is these trees, you can't do anything from the ground. You can't harvest the apples that are on top from the ground without a bamboo pole or something like that, or getting on a ladder. When you prune, you pull things down a little bit shorter, then it's easier to do things from the ground, which is safer. Nobody wants to fall off a ladder trying to prune or harvest an apple. An apple's not worth falling off a ladder and getting yourself hurt.
So, what we'll do is, if somebody wants to take a pair of pruners, we can just go and grab another tree. It doesn't really matter which one. You can find one that's probably one of these
There you go, Scott. Give yours back, buddy.
I'm going to finish up these.
Before I shut the video off here, because people watching may have the same questions, are there any other questions that anybody has? We can kind of answer things specifically as we run into situations on the trees. Yeah, you would prune a crab apple the exact same way. Peaches are the only ones that you maybe prune a little bit differently. Now, if you've got old peach trees like this that are already established, they're already growing, the thing with peaches is you prune them heavy. So you prune basically till there's about a stick left on a peach tree, because the fruit comes out on 1-year-old wood. So everything that grew last year, that's where all your peaches are coming next year. On apple trees, the blooms come on 2-year-old wood. So right here where this bloom is at, this wood is actually 2 years old right here. So it takes an extra year from the time you prune and you get that new growth until you start to see that fruit. So that's the biggest difference, I guess, between one tree to the next, is most of our stone fruits are going to grow on 1-year-old wood. Peaches, nectarines, those types, whereas apples, pears, those are going to be on that 2-year-old wood. Mm-hmm. So that's a...
Yeah. This time of year, no. Because that's just like, that's an example of what we're talking about, these big tall branches that come up, these suckers that have turned into branches now. This time of the year, we're going to have to just leave them. Because if you go in now and try to take that out, you'll probably kill the tree. So, just right now, just go in like this and open it up. And then come fall, after like Thanksgiving, you can go in then, because it should be dormant enough then. You can go in then and go in and selectively cut out some of those limbs that are really tall in it, and then that way you'll bring the foundation scaffolding down the shoulder.
Yeah, and sometimes that's a process that takes 2 or 3 years to get it into something that's manageable, so you don't stress the tree out. And really, we've all seen those pruning jobs that, I won't mention companies' names, of people in their yards that literally they prune it all and they leave a 10-foot tall stump. You see what happens the next year. The tree's not dead, but you've got water sprouts everywhere. You would do the same thing here if you really came in and did a lot of that heavy, big cuts. So if you take 2 or 3 years and slowly bring it down into some semblance of size, that's usually your best bet to not really freak that tree out, so you still get that good production year after year as well.
And Chris selected good on this tree to start with, because it's got a dead limb that's here. There's an example of what happens to them with years of neglect. And you can come around over here and see, and you're going to be absolutely amazed that this limb is even alive. And you see this backside of it. And one of the things that you would end up doing with this, hopefully with this pruning that you've done on this limb this year, the hope is that there will be a dormant bud in here that will break dormancy and start growing out lateral. You'd like maybe one to go that way, maybe another one to come out this way, down below this damaged part, down in here, so that then you can grow those out. And like Chris was talking, you might come out and put some weighted something on it to get those limbs and do more lateral, so that then you can take this one off. Because this one needs to come off pretty soon because of all this old damage in here, because if you don't get it off there soon, an ice and snowstorm is going to end up breaking it off and then maybe split this tree all the way down to the side, and you don't want to have that happen.
Yep.
Because then you almost lost your tree.
Is it Scott?
Yes.
So Scott, are we worried about this over here? Because I've seen this a lot on trees.
Yes.
Where you've got some issues down here at the base of the stump.
And that's because it's an older tree.
Okay.
It has the same problem, some of the neglect with it. It's gotten damaged probably from some pruning and that you can see there's a couple of stobs that were there that the trees still back off in the corner. But what's happening and either insects or disease got into it. And so it is a problem. And this tree is and it's another reason why you want to bring the height down and get it down shorter, so that every time you take something, do cuttings off the top of the tree, you'll encourage the dormant buds that are down lower on the trunk to break dormancy and come out and grow, and then you can end up repairing around that.
Okay.
No, do not. That right there is the better way to leave it. Don't use any wound cut spray or paint. That's the worst thing you can do. The plants will heal themselves where these cuts are. You can go back in and watch and see on these cuts. There's one movement in here, and it will end up kicking into gear, and it will, you're fine, and it will seal that collar. There's a collar around that branch, and it'll grow and seal it off. This probably got painted. That's probably what happened. Is it got painted, and then it sealed in a little bit of bacteria, and then that bacteria rotted out that branch stud, and then that's why you have this collar effect. And that's why this collar. Don't put that on, and you'll be amazed. Like these cuttings, like this one over here, this one here about the size of a quarter, that'll be halfway healed off by this fall. If you're really quick and just start growing sealing off, that'll take care of itself. I mean, they've been around for a long time. Plants know how to take care of themselves, and they will. So just don't paint it. That black paint is the worst thing you can use. Any other questions? Well, you need to send us a picture, and then we can give you advice on your tree. Okay. Truly, that's the better thing, because everyone is a different, in your case example, and is some of it laying on the ground?
I mean, we'll pick that up, but yeah, like it's almost exactly like this tree. One branch was dying, and then the ice storm this winter was too heavy for it, and it split that branch off.
Yeah. Yeah. Did it go and pull down the bark?
Not all the way to the ground.
But it pulled down some. Yeah. Well, the best thing you can do right now is go in and go ahead and cut that branch off.
Okay.
And get it off there, and then. I don't know. Yeah, I need to see pictures to tell you honestly.
Yeah,
Send us a picture to the email.
Yep.
I took cuttings off of it this winter to try to sprout, but I don't know if I'm successful yet or not.
Right. Yeah, I mean it's a crapshoot with it. You probably do need to get that damaged limb off, but at this point now, disease and bacteria has already hit that, so we need to kind of walk it through and see.
Okay.
But one of us there will get to see the photos now and kind of chime in and give us some recommendations on that. But there's plenty of us that can help you walk through how to rescue the tree. Knowing though that it is probably going to die.
How to salvage the last remaining years.
Yeah. And you truly could end up getting another 10, 15 years out of it. I have went in, I know where there's one right now that we went in and did some of that kind of salvation too. And that tree is still good. So the trees they're tough.
Yeah.
They really can be tough.
And there doesn't seem to be a difference whether you do a straight cut or an angle. It's just a diagonal.
Okay, let's go over here to the tree and we'll show you. Oh, here's another good example too.
Oh yeah.
Here's another one where it split off, and we're talking about the disease has already hit into this. This fall, this limb needs to be cut off. Probably, well, you've got some laterals here, so maybe not all the way back to here. Well, yeah, you need to. Yeah. Because here's why. Instead of taking this limb and cutting it off short above here where these laterals are already coming out, if you cut this off here, either square or at an angle, it's still going to let disease in on that stub. So when I talked about earlier that the hormones are in around this collar, this is that growth collar around here. You can't see it very well down in here, but you can see it up in here, and probably around on this, right on this side. You want to take and cut this. You'll prune it off up here.
Yeah.
You want to do a cut under here, and then come back up here and cut it off here and let this fall off.
Right.
Then you'll have a stub. Then you can come back in with the chainsaw without having all that weight, that limb pressuring on this, and then come back in here. Then come right up here, right on top of that growth collar, and cut that off right around through there.
Okay.
So that answers it. It doesn't have to be straight. Doesn't have to be an angle. When you are cutting, you're looking out here at these branches, and you're saying, okay, you're looking at this, seeing that, okay, I want to take, let's just go back into this. Right in, this one right here. Yeah, this is the sucker, the water spout you want to take out. You can see that growth color all the way around that really well there. It's very, very prominent. So if you go into this with pruners and put right on top of it, and it's square as it'll be, and that growth collar will come back in and it will seal that off.
Okay. Gosh.
And so it is a little bit, I did cut it at a little bit of an angle. It's once you've got to the point where you're pruning a lot, you kind of just do it and don't think about it.
I didn't know anything about the growth thing. I just was trimming them, but I can see now.
Going in here and just cutting it off straight like this, it is not harmful, but what's going to happen is when you cut it off high above one of these dormant buds, this stem is going to die all the way back down to that bud, which again is going to let disease and insects potentially mine into it. So you really want to take and you want to cut at an angle right above that dormant bud, and you snip it off. That way moisture runs off, and then that growth hormone will kick in and it'll heal that off right there, because right at that bud there is the greatest concentration of the growth hormones than anywhere else on the plant.
Okay.
It's at each one of these buds, and this tree will automatically start putting those hormones to heal that wound. It'll grow and it'll seal that right off, and then the branch will, this bud on this side, you can't see it from where you all are, but on my side there's a bud here, and that bud will break dormant and it'll start growing up, and it'll take over the leader, and it'll be a nice branch that can grow.
Because I have a dead limb. I don't know if I have any of these or not, but if I want to cut the dead off. But if I want to save any of these, I guess, to get, because it seems like I have a lot of bloom at top and nothing.
Well, and you're not really going to, because the trees have, if they've gone like this, that's what happens.
Okay.
Because most of the time people prune down here so that they can get underneath and walk or mow.
Yeah.
And you do want to have that, but the thing is, you want to have that as well. But you also, like Chris had mentioned, you want to bring that top down so that, and I think Brad or someone said with it too about picking, you don't want to have to get up on ladders and be picking. You know, one of those bamboo poles or whatever that you have with one of those fruit pickers baskets, reach up and just pick them off like that. That's what you want to do off the ground. And so you'll go in and take off the top after you've opened this up. In the fall, you'll come back in and take off the top more and bring it back down. And then when you do that, you're going to get this. All this mess is going to happen down lower. But you need that. You want that to happen so that then you can go in and selectively take off the branches that you don't want, like all these new ones here. You don't want those. Now that's another thing too. You want this knife blade to be as close to the trunk as it can be, so that it's right on top of that growth collar, and then that way you cut it off nice and tight. You saw, I don't know if you noticed, but I went like this and was going to cut it, and when you go in here like this, there's a stub. See that little stub? You don't want that. So you want to flip your pruners over so that knife will strip it off tighter. And then that way that ghost crawler has a chance to come in there and see what I like. And that's one of those things that when you're pruning for a while, I forget to tell people that because, yeah, I automatically just and do it and forget to tell someone. So, but that's the best thing you can do is just flip that blade, make sure that knife blade is against the branch, and just snip it. You guys want to take a try at them? Cut these suckers here off. We'll go back behind the brake.